It should have rung. That was the law. When justice was ready, the bell would speak first, high above the chapel, loud enough to stir God himself. But this morning, it hangs mute in the mist, like a mouth too afraid to open. The fog is heavy. It's curling through the village like old breath. It clings to woolen shawls, creeps into cracked timber, and eats the dawn in slow silence. The roofs are hunched, burdened by a damp that never quite dries. There is no birdsong. Even the crows have chosen not to come. On the chapel steps, moss grows fat in the mortar. The stone is dark with age and rot. And the bell rope, the sacred rope that must be pulled before any blood can fall, sways gently like it remembers something. It is stained a color between rust and wine, and no one touches it anymore unless they must. They wait for it to move on its own. Beneath the belfry, the townsfolk gather. It's not out of duty, but because fear has a scent, and it draws them like wolves. To the edge of the wood, its face is pale, eyes downcast, fingers clenched around crosses, charms, or nothing at all. A woman hums to keep her tears from spilling. A child tugs at her skirt, not knowing why they are here, only that today is not like the others. No one speaks, because everyone knows the bell is not late. It is listening, and when it does not ring, the silence becomes heavier than sound. It means judgment has already begun. Behind the chapel, where the grass no longer grows and even weeds hesitate, he sharpens the blade. The executioner does not need to be summoned. He wakes before the rest, before the baker, before the priest. Before the sin, his hands move with rhythm, back and forth across the wet stone. The blade is not for show. It has memory. It has weight. He knows how much pressure each soul demands. He does not whistle. He does not pray. But he listens, not for the bell, but for the stillness that follows it. Inside his cottage, the air smells of iron and soap. Strange cleanliness, everything. In its place, the robes, the gloves, the tools. There is no blood here, only the threat of it. A candle burns low, but steady. Shadows ripple against the ceiling, like old spirits brushing past the walls. He tightens his leather belt, buckles it with the same fingers that once braided a daughter's hair long ago, before her fever turned to prayers and prayers too. Smoke. He has not spoken her name in 10 winters. But some mornings, like this one, her voice returns in the rustle of the leaves. Not loud, just enough. Outside, the villagers wait. They do not know who will be chosen, but they all wonder if it will be them. For here, judgment comes not by trial or parchment. There is no herald, no accusation, no defense. Only a name whispered from the shadow of the chapel to the silence of the blade. Sometimes the name is guilty, sometimes it is convenient, but once it is spoken, the bell should toll. That was how it began years ago when the war ended and the king gave his crown to the clergy. The bell would ring once for the crime, twice for the sinner, and thrice for the blade. Now it rings for no one, because the names come quietly now, too quietly for dignity, no, too quietly for truth. They arrive in folded notes, slipped beneath doors, or murmured confessions exchanged for bread. Oh, they are forged. In envy sealed by desperation, delivered by those who sleep soundly only when others do not, and still the executioner obeys, not the law, not the priest, the silence. Because when the bell doesn't ring, something worse begins. In the square, the villagers shift their weight. One man scratches at the red boil behind his ear, hoping it isn't plague. Another woman mouths a prayer. Not for forgiveness, but forgetfulness. God. To be forgotten is the safest thing. Somewhere, a dog whines. Then quiet, the sun struggles behind gray clouds. Its light is thin, like old parchment, unable to warm the stones. The chapel doors remain closed. But the executioner has already stepped into the yard. He walks without hurry, not with pride nor sorrow. Just certainty. His boots sink slightly in the wet ground. Each step, an echo of every step he's ever taken, toward the scaffold. No one looks directly at him. They avert their eyes as if seeing him as an omen, But a child, the same child from before, peeks between skirts, sees the blade tucked into his belt, asks, "Why doesn't it ring?" The mother hushes him too late. The executioner hears. But he says nothing, because how does one explain that silence is safer than the truth? That when the bell rings, there is still time. Time for appeal. Time for mercy. Time for change. But when it does not, when justice slips in like a shadow at dawn, it means it's already too late. The girl from last autumn didn't hear the bell either. She was found guilty of nothing. No crime spoken, no sin proven. Just a pattern in the stars, a whispered rumor. A mother's debt. They took her on a foggy morning. It's just like this one. And when she stepped to the block, she whispered, "Tell the bell I forgive it." No one ever did. Now, the executioner reaches the base of the gallows. He lifts the blade not as a threat, but as ritual. He places it on the wooden platform, careful, as if laying down a child. The rope sways above him, dry as bone. The wood creaks. The wind listens. Still no bell. He waits. He always waits a moment longer than he needs to. Because once the act is done, nothing can be undone. Not the silence. Not the blood. Not the forgetting. But this morning, strange as it is, no one steps forward. No name is called. No man condemned. No rope drawn tight. Just mist, breath, and questions that hang heavier than the blade. Perhaps it was a mistake. Perhaps no name was chosen. Or perhaps just this once. Silence means something else. The villagers begin to drift away, slowly, unsure if they should feel relieved or terrified. Because if no one dies today, then who will die tomorrow? The executioner lowers the blade, turns back toward the chapel. The fog parts for him, briefly, like the world still remembers what it means to yield. And behind him, bell rope twitches. Not a pull. Not quite, but enough. Enough to promise that next time, it will ring next. Bread, boil, bone, they always ask for bread. Even the proud ones, the liars, the killers, the ones who once spat at the church steps. At the end, they ask for something warm. Bread, onions, if there's time. A boiled root. A crust dipped in fat. It's not to satisfy hunger, but to remember what it was like to be human. It is still dark when the kitchen fires are lit, not by the monks. They stopped doing that after the winter of 3 hangings, but by a boy with a twisted foot and eyes too old for his face. Doesn't ask questions. Doesn't need to. He's seen what happens when the kitchen goes cold. The pot groans on the hearthstone, filled with cloudy water, onions softened to paste. No meat, no salt, just enough to smell like comfort. The boy burns his fingers as he stirs, but he says nothing. Pain is not a reason to speak. A loaf of black bread is cut in half, crust hard as bark, crumbs sour with rye and thyme. They say it's blessed. They say it was made with holy flour, ground from wheat grown in cursed soil. But no one believes that any more it is bread, is warm. That is enough. The meal is set not at a table, but on a slab of stone behind the chapel. Here the condemned are not fed by servants or priests or kin. They eat alone. Always alone this morning. The man is already waiting. He sits with his back straight, knees drawn close, as if the fog has made him small again. He was once a shepherd, the kind who sang to his flock and carved whistles from elderwood. Now he is just a name whispered to the executioner in the dark. No one told him what he did, only that it was enough. He does not cry. He thanks the boy with a nod. Tears are wasted on those who have no more to beg for. He tears the bread slowly. Dipping each piece in the steaming broth, he eats with reverence. Not for God, but for the small mercy of chewing. The villagers pretend not to watch. They go about their morning chores with ears tilted toward the yard. A woman drops her spindle 3 times. The blacksmith strikes cold iron, lost in thought. They wonder, as they always do, if this one deserves it. If the bread should taste bitter in his mouth, if the broth should scald his tongue. But justice no longer asks for proof. It's only obedience. Behind the chapel wall, the priest mutters a half prayer as he polishes the altar. He doesn't speak to the condemned anymore. Not after last year when the boy with the stammer asked him, "Will you hold my hand?" But you did. And the blood never washed out. Now the priest blesses from a distance. Holy oil smeared on stones. Latin words for a God who no longer answers with miracles. It's only weather. The kitchen boy returns to the hearth, presses his blistered palms against cool stone. He does not know the man's name, but he remembers the way he chewed, slow, grateful, as if tasting not just food but memory. When the bread is gone, the man sits back, closes his eyes, and waits. He does not ask for water. He does not ask for forgiveness, only silence. The executioner appears without footsteps. His hood is drawn low, shadow swallowing what the cowl cannot. In his hand, he carries the blade. Not raised, not threatening. It's like a shepherd's crook in another life. He says nothing, only gestures. And the man, the one who sang to sheep, rises. They walk together, not bound, not dragged, just side by side, as though on a pilgrimage. No one follows, no one cries out, because this part is sacred. The moment between bread and bone, when a man becomes something else, warning, a quiet. The path to the gallows is lined with frost, the kind that looks like lace on old stone. Beneath their feet, the ground crunches softly, a sound that reminds the villagers they are still alive. A dog whines behind a door. A child coughs. Beneath a wool blanket, somewhere far off, the river carries last year's sins to the sea at the scaffold. The rope sways gently in anticipation. It remembers every neck, never forgets a weight. The man steps up with no hesitation. The bread has done its work. It has reminded him who he was, and now he lets go. The executioner does not rush. He arranges the noose with care. It whispers. Something no one hears. Perhaps not even the man. And then there is silence. Not the silence of fear. Not the silence of cruelty. But the kind of silence that follows a lullaby. The trapdoor groans. The rope sings. And the man is gone. No one claps. No one gasps. This death is not for entertainment. It is for balance. The executioner waits a moment. Longer, he watches the body sway and steps down as if from a pulpit. The bread is still warm on the stone where it had been eaten, steam rising like ghost breath. The kitchen boy watches from the doorway. He does not cry, but he does not stir another pot today. Instead, he takes a single crust from the table, places it in the fire, and watches it blacken to ash dot in the chapel. The priest lowers the shutters. The sun will not come in today. The village moves on. Da-da. Blacksmith strikes again. The woman picks up her spindle, but something lingers, a feeling, a question. What would I ask for if it were me? Bread, salt, a name remembered. No one says it aloud, but they all think it. And in the yard behind the chapel, where the bread was broken, a crow lands beside the ashes. It pecks once, then flies away, leaving only smoke and bone. He has lived among them for 17 winters, but no one truly knows. When he arrived, some say he came from the southern road, dragging a wheelbarrow full of rusted iron and stained linen. Others claim he was always here, a shadow who simply stepped in to shape the day justice required hands steadier than faith. The truth is buried somewhere beneath the mud and cobblestones, and no one dares to dig for it. They call him the Quiet One. Some whisper Ragface, though never near the chapel. To the children, he is the man who never blinks. The elders, he is what happens when mercy dies. He lives behind the old tannery, where the hides hang like ghosts and the air forever smells of vinegar and sorrow. His home is not a house, but a stone box with a chimney too narrow for smoke. Number, garden, no chickens, just tools. Row upon row of them, hanging from nails like frozen prayers. Axes of different lengths, ropes, coiled with care. A hood stitched with oilskin and lined with fur to soften the breath against winter's bite. No emblems, no cross. Only the work. Every morning, before the market stirs, he walks to the stream with a pale cloth bundle in his arms. He washes his blades by hand, one stroke, 2. He lets the water carry yesterday's red into the reeds, where it clings like forgotten scripture. He does not speak, not to the priest, not to the boy who brings him bread, not even to the dying, but in silence he listens. The sounds most men ignore: the flutter of robes behind chapel doors, the nervous knock of a merchant avoiding tax, the names whispered through walls, and sometimes the sobs that rise before dawn when the guilty begin to suspect they've been seen. He does not need confessions. He recognizes guilt by its smell, sour like wool left too long in the rain. And yet it's not hatred that drives him, not duty, not vengeance, only stillness, the kind forged by loss. Long ago, when the war took his brother and fire took his wife, he knelt in the ash with nothing left to bury. And in that moment, the town saw something it could use: a man emptied of joy, but not strength. A vessel, a tool. He took the hood without question, not because he wanted to serve justice, but because silence needs a face, and he had one no one would miss. Still, there are rules, quiet ones, like cracks beneath a frozen pond. He never chooses. The names arrive wrapped in cloth, stitched into Bibles, or scratched onto driftwood. He opens them without blinking, memorizes them, then burns the scrap. If he recognizes a name, he shows no sign. But once, when the paper bore the name of a woman who used to sing in the orchard, he hesitated. It's just long enough for the candle to flicker, but he did not refuse. He never refuses. The gallows must remain clean, and so he stains himself instead. Some nights, the wind carries his voice through the tannery wall, a low humming, almost a lullaby. The song has no words, only breath and rhythm. Some believe it's the only thing that keeps the crows from nesting. On his roof, a child once dared to follow him. He hid behind the tool shed, watched as the man laid his tools out in perfect symmetry, each blade kissed by oil, each rope untangled, then wound again with the care of a cradle. The child stepped on a twig, and in that moment the man turned. He said nothing, did nothing, only looked. But the boy wet himself and never spoke of it again, because there is a weight in the quiet man's eyes, a kind of gravity that pulls the truth out of your bones, whether you've done wrong or not. Yet once, during the winter of starving bells, he was seen helping an old woman drag firewood through the snow. No one thanked him. No one mentioned it, because to acknowledge kindness from the executioner feels like a curse. But some remember. They remember the way he paused when a child's shoe was left near the gallows. He picked it up, stared, then set it gently on the chapel step, a silent offering to something he could no longer name. On rare days he visits the graveyard alone. He does not kneel. He does not cross himself. He walks slowly between the stones, touching none. They say he stands longest by the smallest grave, where the headstone has no name, only a carving of a lamb. When the sun sets, his shadow stretches long across the village square. No one walks near it. The tavern windows shudder before he passes. Even the dogs grow still. He does not mind. He prefers solitude. For in solitude, there is honesty. In noise, only forgetting. And what he does must never be forgotten. Still, even shadows must be watched. This morning a new name arrived, folded within a tax ledger, scrawled in trembling ink. He read it once, then twice, and though his face did not change, he did not burn the paper. Not yet, because this name, this one, meant something. A memory stirred, a voice, a laugh. Hand once offered in kindness, when he still believed he was a man. He stared at the paper until the candle guttered, then folded it again. He placed it beneath the sharpest blade and sat down beside it. He did not eat that day, nor sharpen his tools, nor hum, only watched the bundle of parchment as if it might disappear on its own. But paper does not vanish, and justice does not wait for grief to settle. Tomorrow the bread will be warmed, the rope will be measured, and the quiet man will once again be asked to break the silence. not with words, but with the final sacred sound. There is no scroll, no wax seal pressed by a royal thumb, no court scribes or heralds to cry out the charges. Justice here does not arrive with horns or parchment, comes in shadow, stitched into whispers, and etched in places ink does not touch. The list of it can be called that is not kept in the chapel, nor the town hall. It exists everywhere and nowhere, in glances exchanged at market stalls, in the silence between a baker and his wife, in the half-finished prayers of men who fear being remembered. A name is a fragile thing, too easily spoken, too easily erased. And yet here, a name is the heaviest burden a soul can carry. At dawn, the priest finds a bundle tucked beneath the chapel door, wrapped in coarse wool, bound with twine pulled from a flour sack. Inside, a single piece of cloth, a name stitched in red thread, small, crooked letters, as if sewn by trembling fingers. He does not ask where it came from. He never does. He takes it to the basin behind the altar, lays it over cold water, and watches the red thread bleed. Not enough to erase the name, just enough to make it human. Then he lights a candle and walks slowly to the turn. He leaves the cloth folded beneath a stone, marked with an iron cross. It is always the same stone. And when he turns to go, he murmurs a prayer, not for the dead, but for the ones who remain. Behind the tannery wall, the executioner is already awake. He's been sitting by the hearth for hours, unmoving, as if listening to time itself breathe. When he lifts the stone and sees the cloth, he does not react. Not at first. He picks it up as if it might burn him, unfolds it with care, reads the name stitched in red. His thumb brushes the thread. There is a pause, then a breath. Then the cloth is tucked into the folds of his robe close to the chest, like a confession. The name will never be spoken aloud. Not by the priest. Not by the executioner. Not even by the condemned. To speak it would be to stain it. To give it weight it does not deserve. The townspeople don't know how the names are chosen. Some say it's the bishop. Others claim it's the tax collector, or the merchants' guild, or the midwife who lost her child last winter. But deep down, they know the truth. The names come from them. A quarrel in the rain, a glance held too long, a favor refused, secret. Expose. That's all it takes. No trial. It's just a whisper. And the list grows. Not on paper, but in breath. There was a boy once no older than 12 who laughed when a widow slipped on ice. By dusk, his name had been spoken 3 times. By morning, it lay in red thread behind the chapel. The villagers claimed they didn't know who submitted it, but no one denied it, and when the bell did not ring, they knew the silence was theirs. That's the thing about justice born from fear. It wears the face of the village, and every face is guilty. In the tavern, men drink faster when the air grows. Heavy, they speak softer. Jokes are left unfinished, because at any moment, a word too sharp, a truth too loud, might be heard by the wrong ears, and once a name is remembered, it cannot be unremembered. The kitchen boy knows this. He once heard a merchant say the executioner should be given a taste of his own blade. 2 days later, the merchant's wife went missing. No one asked where she'd gone. But the boy started walking slower when passing the tannery. He sees the names arrive, sees the priest's eyes dim with each delivery. Sometimes the priest burns incense after he leaves the cloth. Other times, he scrubs his hands until the skin peels, but always. The list continues, unwritten, endless. The executioner never hesitates. He accepts each name with the same solemn silence. Something lingers. The last name, the one folded under the iron cross this morning, did not leave his fingers. He stared at it for longer than usual, his jaw clenched. His hand trembled once, a small twitch like a moth striking glass. Then, he did something he hadn't done in years. He placed the cloth beside a candle and waited. Waited for the flame to flicker in protest. Waited for a sign. Waited for the silence to speak back. But it didn't. Only the wind answered, curling through the cracks in the stone walls. So he stood, gathered his robe, and left the candle burning. The flame did not bend. Outside, the sky was swollen with clouds. The gallows stood like teeth on the edge of town, waiting to bite. He walked past the market square, past the old well, past the bakery, where the girl with the scar used to hum as she kneaded dough. He did not look at the people, but they looked at him, and though no name had been spoken aloud, they all knew, they always knew. Somewhere someone had offered a name. And now that name was real. Tomorrow there would be bread, boiled onions, a rope carefully measured, and another space left in the silence where a voice used to be. Because in this town, justice is not blind, it is deaf, and it hears only what the fearful want it to hear. The bell still does not ring, but the people have learned not to wait for it. Instead, they listen to the hush that falls when the list grows longer. The hush that settles over the chapel. It's the hush that tightens around the throat of the guilty and the innocent. The list without ink does not forget. It cannot be burned. It cannot be buried, because it lives in the eyes of those who look away, and the lips of those who choose silence. And tomorrow, when the gallows creak and the wind carries the weight of another name unspoken, the town will wake once more in dread, not because they fear death, but because they fear that next time the name will be theirs. The rope is measured by hand, not with rulers, not with scales, but by memory. The executioner's hands are old, yet steady. He knows the weight of a man before he even lays eyes on him. Knows how long the drop must be to snap the neck, not strangle. Knows how mercy must be stitched into the grain of hemp. He works in silence. Each loop is coiled with reverence, not haste. As if he were weaving a cradle instead of a killing knot. As if he were binding a soul, not ending a life. Outside, the village begins to stir. They don't speak of it, not directly.
Act, but they know?
They feel it in their bones, the way. You feel a storm coming. Windows are shuttered with more care. Children are told to stay inside, and the butcher sharpens his cleaver too early. It's pretending it's just another day. But it isn't, because the rope has been cut, and the gallows have been swept. And when that happens, someone is going to die in the chapel. The priest is on his knees. He's not praying for the soul on the cloth. Not exactly. He's praying for the town. For the ones who named, for the ones who watched, the silence that followed. His fingers twitch on the beads. Not from age, but guilt, because he knows the name. This time, he knows, and though his tongue is tied by vows and fear, his heart screams. In protest, he saw her once, the girl. His name was stitched into yesterday's cloth. She had a limp and a laugh that came too. Freely for someone born beneath poverty's heel, she made her bread with herbs no one could name and told stories about dreams that walked. The town called her a liar, but they bought her bread anyway. She refused to bow. And in a village built on obedience, that alone was a death sentence. No crime, just defiance, just a little too. There's much light in her eyes, and now the rope is ready. The gallows wait like a stage with no audience. The wood has splinters where the condemned once clawed. The beam groans when the wind passes through. The executioner arrives first, always first. He sets down the rope with care, pulls the lever twice, checking the tension. Then he sits. He waits. And as he waits, he remembers. He remembers the first time he measured a rope wrong. The man didn't die clean. It took 3 minutes, watched every second. He vomited afterward. Now he makes no mistakes. Now, the rope is always the perfect length, because the only mercy he can offer is speed. By midday, the square is full. Not with shouts or jeers, but with presence. The village always shows up, not because they enjoy it, not even out of duty, but because to not be there is to draw suspicion, and suspicion is a thread that ends at the chapel door. No one speaks. Children are hushed. Mothers clutch their shawls. Men pretend they're bored, but every eye is locked on the wooden frame. Waiting, the girl is brought forward. Her hands are bound, but her back is straight. She does not beg, she does not weep. She looks into the crowd and finds no one, because no one dares meet her gaze. Not the woman who sold her spices, not the man who once kissed her behind the well, not the priest, especially not the priest. The executioner steps forward. He does not read charges. There are none. He does not ask for last words. There is no need. This is not a court. It is a ritual. And rituals do not change. He places the rope round her neck, tightens the knot. One breath, two. She turns her head slightly. It's just enough to catch the clouds above, and then she speaks. Quietly. Make it quick. The executioner nods. It is the only mercy left when the trapdoor falls. The crowd does not flinch. They blink. Nothing more. They've learned how to harden their eyes. But the sound stays with them. The crack. The final punctuation. Some say the body twitched. Others say she never moved. It doesn't matter. By dusk, the gallows are empty again, and the rope, frayed now, stained slightly red, is coiled and stored, not burned, not buried. Just kept, because there will always be another name. That night, the tavern is quiet. No music, no laughter, just cups clinking and the soft scrape of spoons. They eat soup too hot, chew bread too long. No one mentions the girl. No one has to, because they all saw the way her fingers curled before the drop. They all remember the way she said, "Make it quick." And deep down, in places too dark for language, they wonder if they will say the same. Back in the tannery, the executioner sits with the unburned cloth in his lap. The red thread is dull now, the name's still visible. He cannot bring himself to toss it into the fire. Instead, he folds it, places it in the box beneath his cot, next to a dozen others, each cloth a name, each name a face, each face a moment he can never return, and still, the town sleeps, because mercy in this place is not forgiveness. It is efficiency. It is silence. It is a rope, measured to the inch. And the only question that matters now is this: who measures mercy when the rope finally runs out? The bell did not want to wake that morning. It hung heavy and silent, shrouded in mist like a stone heart too burdened to beat. The villagers had grown accustomed to its quieters of stillness, had taught them to listen for the absence of sound, spaces where justice had slipped away. But today was different. A tremor stirred in the fog, a trembling whisper that rattled the bones of the town, and then a clang, sharp, unyielding. The bell rang. It was not the slow toll of mercy, or the mournful cry of sorrow. It was a roar that split the dawn, Summons that shook the spires and turned the pale faces toward the chapel. Children stopped their whispers. The smith's hammer fell still. Even the wind held its breath. The bell was calling names. Not one, not two, but many. The executioner, cloaked in shadow, stepped from the tannery, the echo of iron ringing in his wake. The hood fell back for a moment, revealing eyes too tired for years so young. Did not hesitate. He did not falter, because the bell had broken the silence in the square. The villagers gathered not with hope, but with dread. No one spoke above a whisper, and those words were laced with fear. This was no ordinary day. It was reckoning. The priest, standing beside the altar, crossed himself with shaking hands. His prayers had run dry like the well in summer, but still, he sought refuge in ancient words. The first name was called aloud, not from parchment or cloth, but from the bell's toll, a voice long silenced, now carried on the wind. A woman stepped forward. Her face was pale, her eyes wild with disbelief. She clutched her shawl tight, as if it could shield her from the weight of the moment. She did not plead. She did not cry. She only listened, one by one. The names fell from the bell's throat, a litany of grief, a roll call of shadows. Men who once smiled in the market, children who laughed behind closed doors, mothers who prayed for dawn, each name a thread unraveling the fragile weave of the village. The executioner moved through the crowd like a ghost, collecting those called by the bell. There was no need for bindings. There's no need for voices raised in protest. The bell had spoken, and they obeyed. In the chapel, the priest watched the procession with hollow eyes. He thought of the boy who once begged for his hand, the girl who made bread with wild herbs, the quiet man with blades sharp enough to cut silence itself. The weight of all their names pressed upon him like a stone. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing the gallows standing stark and unyielding against a pale sky. The executioner reached the scaffold first. He paused, touched the beam as if seeking forgiveness from the wood. The first condemned climbed the steps without sound. No struggle, no cry. The rope was ready, measured by hands that had learned mercy in the spaces between breaths. The bell tolled again, long and mournful this time. A farewell, or perhaps a warning. As each life ended, the village felt the silence return, but heavier now, weighted by the bell's remembrance. And when the last name was called, when the final breath had been taken, the bell hung still once more, but it had spoken its truth. The executioner turned away from the gallows, his shadow long and thin against the stones. Behind him, the villagers faced a silence unlike any before, a silence filled with names, a silence that could no longer be ignored. The bell had finally woken, and with its ringing, the town had no choice but to listen. The bell fell silent, but its echo lingered, a faint, persistent hum beneath the breath of the wind. The village moved slowly, like a body waking from fever. Shadows stretched longer, eyes searched for meaning in the pale light. Ashes drifted through the air, soft and gray, like forgotten prayers. They rose from the hearths left cold, the kitchens emptied of warmth. The pyres where names had been burned, cloths soaked in red thread, now reduced to dust. No flames reached the sky, only smoke, curling in reluctant spirals. Reluctant to vanish, the executioner walked alone beneath the skeletal trees of the orchard, where fruit had long since rotted and fallen. His hands were empty this day. No rope, no blade, only silence. Trailing behind him like a worn cloak, he paused where the earth was loose and soft, where the roots no longer clung. Fingers brushed the soil, tracing the shape of a name not yet spoken aloud. The same name that had slipped beneath the chapel door days before the bell had tolled. He knelt and pressed his palm to the earth, feeling the cold dampness seep through. His skin? There was no forgiveness here, only the weight of memory, heavier than stone. Behind him, the village stirred, a fragile thing caught between mourning and forgetting. The priest walked slowly, a bundle of wilted herbs in his hands. He stopped by the well, dropped the herbs into the water, and watched the surface ripple like broken glass. The townsfolk avoided the orchard that day. No children played among the twisted branches. No women gathered to harvest what little remained. Only the crows dared to linger, their black feathers glistening with ashdot in the tavern. Voices spoke in hushed tones. They told stories not of the bell, but of the silence it left behind, of the spaces where hope once lived, the cracks in faith, now wide enough to swallow the moon. The kitchen boy sat by the hearth, hands wrapped around a chipped cup. He stared into the dying embers, as if searching for a spark. Outside, the wind carried a faint scent of burnt rosemary, a last offering to those who had passed. The executioner returned to the tannery that evening, footsteps slow and deliberate. He did not look at the ropes hanging like nooses of shadow, did not touch the blades lined up like soldiers at rest. Instead, he opened the wooden box beneath his cot. Inside lay the folded cloths, names he could no longer bear to burn. One by one, he held them up to the fading light. Each a story, each a soul, each a wound. He whispered a name he hadn't dared speak aloud for years, the name that had refused to be silenced by rope or flame. And as he spoke it, the first tear he'd shed in decades traced a slow path down his weathered cheek. Because even the quietest man can carry a storm inside. The village sleeps beneath a blanket of ash tonight, and somewhere in the dark, a bell waits not to toll for justice, but to remind them that silence is never empty. It is full of all the things they dare not say. And when the dawn breaks again, The question will remain, what will they choose? To remember? The chapel doors stand closed, heavy with the scent of wet stone and fading incense. Inside, the walls hold the shadows of forgotten sermons, echoes of voices raised in hope, now cracked and hollow like dried earth. The altar, once a sanctuary, is cloaked in silence, dust settling like ash over worn carvings. Here, prayers no longer seek salvation. They seek only endurance. The priest kneels before the altar, hands folded but trembling. His lips move without sound, mouthing words that have lost their meaning. He prays for mercy, but the word falls flat, swallowed by the cold air. Outside, the village waits, held captive by its own silence. No hymns rise on the wind, no bells ring through the mist. Only the slow, steady breath of a town wrapped in mourning. The kitchen boy watches from a cracked window, his eyes reflecting flickering candlelight. He hears the quiet, feels the weight pressing down like wet wool. The executioner sits alone. In the tannery, the air thick with the smell of vinegar and old leather. His hands, stained by years of work, clutch a small wooden cross, carved with trembling fingers. It is not a symbol of faith. It is a talisman against the void. The names piled beneath his cot grow heavier by the day, each one a whispered accusation. Each one a thread unraveling the fabric of hope. The priest's voice breaks at last, a ragged whisper in the stillness. He confesses his fear that justice has become a lie, that mercy is a forgotten language, and that the prayers offered here are hollow echoes, empty as the bell that refuses to toll. A breeze slips through a cracked window, stirring the candle flames. They flicker like fragile spirits, threatening to go out. Outside, the village stirs with restless footsteps. The faces of those who named, those who whispered, those who stayed silent, all blurred in the gathering dusk. They carry their guilt, like stones in their pockets, heavy and unseen. In the fading light, the executioner rises, stepping into the chill air. He walks past the orchard, past the well, past the empty hearths. He does not look back, because the hollow prayer is not meant for him. It is for those left behind, those who must live with the silence, those who must choose what to remember, what to bury in shadow. Tonight, the village sleeps not beneath peace, but beneath a prayer unanswered, a prayer without sound. And when dawn comes again, the hollow will still be there, waiting for a voice brave enough to fill it. Ashes settle like a shroud across the village, thin and insistent, slipping into cracks between cobblestones and whispered prayers. They cling to the worn cloaks of those who walk the streets, carried on breaths that once sang songs of hope, but now taste of dust and loss. Each grain of ash is a memory fragmented, fragile, falling slowly from a past too heavy to hold. The hearth fires burn low, flickering weakly beneath pots long emptied of stew. No warmth rises to chase away the chill creeping in through cracked windows and broken hearts. Even the dogs curl tighter into themselves, as if to hold what little remains. Of comfort, the executioner moves through this quiet decay, like a ghost tethered to the earth. His footsteps leave no mark, but his presence bends the air a weight unseen yet deeply felt. In his hands, he carries the box of names, now heavier than ever. Worn thin with sorrow and silence, he stops where the orchard meets the village, where the trees stand skeletal against the pale sky. Here the ground is soft, disturbed, still holding the shape of a life taken too soon. He kneels, brushing the ash aside, revealing the earth beneath a dark, damp memory. His fingers trace patterns. In the soil, silent prayers that never find voice. He does not ask for forgiveness, does not ask for release. He asks only for remembrance, for the names tucked inside the cloths, for the faces behind the red thread. The village watches from a distance, drawn to the orchard like moths to a dying flame. Some bring flowers, wild herbs, stolen from forgotten gardens. Others stand in silence, their breaths fogging the cold air, reflecting regret. The priest arrives last, his steps heavy with the weight of a faith fractured by fear. He carries a bundle of charred pages-old prayers burned in a desperate attempt to cleanse the town's sins, scatters the ashes over the disturbed earth. Mingling them with the soil and sorrow, no one speaks, because in this place, words are fragile things, easily broken, easily lost.